Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Simple 7 interview from the Center for Teaching Through Children's Books and Publisher Spotlight. And we are very excited to welcome MEERA SRIRAM. Did I pronounce that right?
You got that.
Hey. And her beautiful book, Dumpling Day from Barefoot Books. And we're just thrilled to have you here to answer our 7 questions. And
Thank you so much, Christina.
Shall we jump right in?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the biggest little question. Why did you decide to write Dumpling Day?
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, and I hope we enjoy this conversation. So I decided to write Dumpling Day because I believe that celebrating the richness of the diversity of our world, including our immediate neighborhoods, must start early, must start very young. I think younger kids deserve to see how multicultural our societies are and an honest reflection of that in the stories that they read. And I think it is important for all of us to normalize representation in books for the very young as well.
Absolutely. And this does it so beautifully. And it's a counting book. Beautiful, beautiful artwork, very detailed, lots of little things to find that aren't mentioned in the text, which I always love.
Right.
So with this mind to starting our young people, our youngest little people, kind of embracing the world from the get-go. When did you realize that food has the power to, as you describe in your author notes, build bridges between people? You know, when did?
Right. To be honest, it did not start off as a book on dumplings, like specifically dumplings. I was working on a story about a kid who moves to the US from a different country, and the kid is in a new school trying to make friends. And eventually in the story, the child is bonding over food with a couple of other classmates. And then I started brainstorming on how can they bond? Like what can bridge them? What will show them or make them realize how they are more similar than different? How much do they have in common so they can actually become friends? And in that process, dumplings just jumped out at me. And the more I started researching, I was so blown away by how there are so many different dumplings around the world that we all love. They are made in very similar ways, but yet their textures and flavors and the method of cooking, the colors and shapes are so different. It's just like humanity, like how when we come in all different backgrounds and shapes and sizes and languages and colors, but as humans, we all experience the same thing. So dumplings became the best kind of food and the funnest and the most lovable food to throw in the story. And eventually the story morphed into so many different things because I got very excited about why just 2 dumplings or 3 dumplings? Why not 10 dumplings or a dozen dumplings? And then I also realized that we need to celebrate this sort of diversity for younger kids, and it became a concept book, and that's how Dumpling Day came about.
It makes me want to make a t-shirt that says, "We are all dumplings."
I'd love that.
Little legs and arms. Yeah, because the analogy is so strong and dumplings are so delicious. And I've been lucky enough to visit and live in places with just a wide variety of dumplings and other foods. And I think it's perfect. And I might want to add that this book made me very, very hungry. And it does include in the back matter all 10 recipes.
Right. You can imagine how hungry I would have gotten during the editing process. Writing is one thing. There were so many times I would start researching and then end up with lunch or dinner on the table. Inez de Antoniano is the illustrator, and she's done a wonderful job, like you mentioned, adding the details on every spread. We kids actually sort of get a window into the household of every family. And there's so much richness in all the textures and the colors and the artifacts that she has included in each home. And Laurel P. Jackson is the food blogger who was so wonderful in contributing these recipes to the book.
And they're so easy to follow, so well organized, and they include real pictures. This is fufu and peanut stew, and I mean, just that's a real picture that made me just want to go get all the things and make it, which I'm probably going to do this weekend because I can't resist. And the story carries, that deep, beautiful message. When in writing this book, and in just writing in general, and in life, who inspired you the most?
Um, in terms of inspiration, I should say my own life experiences. Like for Dumpling Day, in fact, it was my experience as an immigrant. I grew up in India, I moved to America, and food just ended up being that perfect passport or like a ticket to experience and understand so many cultures around the world. And I remember getting here and making friends with immigrants like myself, and we would share recipes. I would experiment, some of the dishes that I ate at their homes. We bonded over so many different types of food. So most of my stories stem from my own life experiences. And I mean, just to give you an example, our family has this tradition of going to a friend's house for every Thanksgiving, where all our friends from different parts of the world gather, and there's this huge multicultural spread. And I've had so many different wonderful foods from around the world every Thanksgiving. Same thing, like I live on a street where we have a block party every year. We all bring a dish, the kids are playing. It's such a joyful event and experience. And it's very similar to the one that you see in the book, where the neighborhood has a potluck and the kids are playing, and the families are just chatting and so laid back and enjoying the food and getting to know each other and understand each other. So most of these stories are coming from my own life experiences and what I see and hear. I listen, I look around, and then stories just sort of like pour out. But in terms of who, typically, like in terms of my writing, like my own writing community, my writing partners, I have a wonderful critique group, and they generally push me to bring out the best in me as a writer. So I think I owe it to them for the craft.
Both of those things resonate deeply for me. When we lived in Japan, I would host Thanksgiving get-togethers in our house, and we would pull out all of the doors. They're all removable, and I would make the more quote unquote traditional American Thanksgiving foods, and then all of our friends would bring in whatever they were from. We would have just this whole spread all over the tables, and it was a tiny house, and we were packed in there, and it was fantastic community building, friendship, fun. And there are so many things that isolate us right now, the pandemic being one of them. But also we just tend to be isolated anyway. And I encourage people to, absolutely take your lead and, reach out and have these food sharing celebrations.
Right. I'm sure those gatherings were wonderful. I'm just imagining the people, the smell, the flavors in that room. Like, just it's a universal experience, and it's so joyful.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's such a great community building activity or experience. So,
and I think we lose sight of it. I think we've lost sight of that in a lot of our communities. So I really hope it comes back, because this book really exemplifies, it's a story to plant a little seed to plant in young readers' minds about doing something like this. Start small and then fill up your house eventually.
Right.
And it's just a beautiful model to set.
Thank you so much.
So we've established that this book has made us both very hungry.
We know exactly what we're going to do after this interview.
We're going to make dumplings of some sort, and we have the recipes in there, so that just exacerbates my whole hunger problem. how, there are 10 recipes in here, but I'm sure you found more. How did you decide which dumplings to include, either from, individual countries that have more than one kind, or the countries that you settled on?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. Um, it was a very interesting journey. I started out by wanting to include dumplings that were, that kids were mostly familiar with, that we sort of like eat, in our lives on a daily basis or more frequently than others. And I also wanted to throw in some that we don't often see represented or included in, the books we find at the library or bookstore, in just the books, in mainstream books. So I started out with that, but I also wanted to make them as diverse as possible in terms of, yes, geography. First of all, they had to be spread around the world in different continents and different regions and different countries and cultures, but also very different in terms of texture, flavor, color, shape, size, and the method of cooking. So you would see something like a samosa, which is sort of a pyramid shaped dumpling, which is brown and oily, and because it's fried. But you would also see tamales, which is like, it has a husk, which is a very interesting texture, and you steam it in a pot, versus burekas, which are not as, as common as one might think, and it's coming out of the oven. They are flaky, more like a pastry. And then shish barak is from like the Arab culture. So it is in yogurt sauce, so it's wet. It's more like a sphere, like round, like fufu is a sphere. It's a perfect sphere, and you eat that with the hand. So there's so many different ways dumplings can be made, like in terms of, and they're folded, some are wrapped, so steamed and baked and fried. So I wanted to bring all of that, so make it as interesting, as flavorful, and as diverse. So that took a lot of research. But my editor was also fabulous in supporting me. Like, there were like a couple of changes we made last minute, and she was like, we should do this because this sort of community or region is underrepresented, and we talked about that and all of that. So we made sure we could make it as diverse as possible, just to represent our world and humanity.
Yeah, and I think you very much succeeded. There's no way to include all the dumplings in a book this size, but you did a lovely job of just kind of telling a lot of different, at least 10 different food stories, 10 different samples of the food those cultures enjoy and eat. And I do have to ask, when in doing your research, did you start with the dumplings, or did you start with looking at a map, or did they kind of go together?
I started with the dumplings. I was just, from the top of my head, I was thinking of dumplings that just look different, like I said, in terms of texture and color and shape. And then it was just so amazing to look up those dumplings, even if they were familiar dumplings, and see how they evolved over centuries and over civilizations, in fact, like literally, like how there's so much history involved with food, and about migration of people, about human migration, and how these recipes or the flavors get transformed, or how they evolve. So all that was so eye-opening and fascinating, and I would just get like hooked during research, and I sort of started doing it with every dumpling. And the more I read, I found more interesting facts and more interesting dumplings. And like I said, from, we started with 2 or 3, and then it went on to like 10. So
I'm just seeing a monster of a middle grade or a YA or an adult book, just history through dumplings,
right.
or around the world in 80 dumplings, or
Oh, yeah,
something.
I would love that.
I
There would be so much to share with kids, and just a great learning
yeah.
for us. Like, we take so much for granted. There's so much history. There's so much like information around everything that we eat.
Mhm.
And it tells us so much about how we have evolved as humans, and how we've come to be what we are, who we are. So that's an excellent idea.
I've fallen down this rabbit hole with breads, and
Mhm.
soups.
Yeah.
And I've taken my own personal deep dives into, just food and people
Right.
and
Right.
history. It's a dangerous, dangerous place. And see, I'm all off track now. um, so when your young readers read this, what do you hope they will take away from it?
Uh, as a concept book, of course, counting, that's the first thing. But I also want readers to celebrate and understand the universal truth of how we have more in common than we think as people. No matter how we look, regardless of what we speak, what we wear, what we eat, I think we have more in common without our differences. With if we were all the same color, speaking the same language, looking the same, the world would just be a boring place. So that's a good reason. That's enough reason for us to celebrate the diversity that we have around us, and to know that we have more in common and that we are more similar than different is the heart of the story that I want readers to celebrate.
And I can just hear, I mean, if I were using this book in my classroom now, I would have those open-ended questions ready to go when we finished reading it. What else is this book about besides numbers?
Right.
And young, very young children can come up with some amazing insights. I have been blown away time and time again by what my students came up with, the things that they saw. So
I completely agree with you. We often try to underestimate the younger audience, but they are way smarter, way insightful, and more emotionally mature than we think they are.
yeah.
So, like you said, this can open up so many conversations around food.
Open-ended questions can be scary because there's always a chance it's going to go where you didn't want it to go, but also you're leaving room open for it to go in wonderful ways. So I think all of that is in this book and definitely more.
Thank you.
So now we have this beautiful book. We're eating the dumplings. We're following the recipes. There's beautiful back matter in this book and beautiful illustrations. Where are you going from here? And I know I just led that off of let's write a book about the world of dumplings, but where are you going from here?
Yeah, I have some exciting things coming up. So I have a board book coming out from Barefoot Books, this publisher of Dumpling Day, in spring of 2023, next year. And I'm so excited because it again goes back to what I believe in, that it is never too early, or kids are never too young to show them how beautiful our diverse world is, and to use Rudine Sims Bishop's terms of books as mirrors and windows. We kids as young as babies and toddlers deserve to see themselves and we need to open up the world for them, so even to babies and toddlers. So I'm very excited about this board book, which is about a baby's day in India, where I grew up and where I take my kids every summer. So I'm excited for that board book. And I have another book called a Garden in My Hands, coming out from Knopf Penguin Random House in spring of 2023 as well. So I'm excited for these books, and I'm working on more stories that again go back to the same themes of celebrating our diversity, for more kids to see themselves in the stories that they read, and to open up new windows.
Well, I am very excited for those upcoming goodies in spring 2023, and I can't wait to see them and hold them and share them. And this book is just, it just fulfills your goals and all of our goals, and as parents and guardians and teachers, educators, librarians, literacy people. It hits so many great spots. So I really thank you for creating this and teaming up with the wonderful people who also helped create this. And I'm just very excited to see this spread and the message go and take off.
Thank you. I truly appreciate you celebrating this book.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Now, a lot of the people who are going to be watching this interview are going to be educators and librarians and literacy people, as well as parents and guardians and beyond. Um, do you have, and all of them are good, all of them, I would say, love books and love libraries. So, do you have any kind of special memory from when you were a child of involving books or libraries that you'd like to share?
That's a fun question. Thank you. Thank you for asking that. Um, the first thing that comes to my mind is the library that I visited as a child. It was probably the only library that I visited as a child. It was a very small library in my neighborhood, just a tiny room with three bookshelves. And I would look forward to going there every summer because my parents had this thing where we could go to the library only when the schools closed because we would be bored at home. So you can read. They would give us a little like allowance or pocket money, and I would wait to go to the library every summer when the school closed. And it's just like I said, a tiny room. It had this shelf, but I can almost smell the library now. When I close my eyes, I can picture it, I can smell it. I remember so many titles from those shelves. And I some of the earliest books that I read, they were mostly British classics. They came from because of how India was colonized. Most of the books that we read were from British literature, English literature. So I remember reading classics. I also remember reading some series from the West, like Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys and all of that. They were my windows. So I never wore jeans. I never knew what sausage was. I never knew what pie was. But this was just fantastical world in front of me. And that's how I knew how places different from my own looked. So that was great. But I also had so many of my homegrown stories, which were grandma tales, folk tales, a lot of mythology that I found in those tiny shelves. So that was my growing up, literature. And and to go back to as an author, how I connect the dots is that I saw so many things like I said, it was either mythology or it was like Western classics, but I never saw myself or my life in any of those pages. So I think it stuck with me. And as a mother now raising kids, I did not want that to repeat for my own kids. And that's also how I started my journey as an author.
You know, I wasn't sure at first if you were referring to a library in India or here in the United States, but I got context that it was in India.
I'm so sorry. I grew up in India, in Chennai, in southern India, and it was in my neighborhood there. Yeah.
And I just, in my mind, I'm thinking, here in the United States, you think library, you think of a fairly substantial building. And the definition of a library is this building full of books. And that's not necessarily the definition of a library everywhere, and it doesn't have to be. For you, it was this very small place with, not a huge collection of books. And the books that were in there, you just treasured and looked forward to. And I find that deeply moving and very joyful.
Thank you.
You
Yeah.
know? And, I think we need to also, now we have little free libraries in the United States where it's out in front of your house. I've got one in front of my house, and you just put your books out there to freely share. And,
Right.
And we call that a little free library also, and that's very small. So
Yeah.
I just find it moving and charming that, your life's path was set by this beautiful little library.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I fell in love with when I first moved to this country as an adult. I was 23 and I walked into a library and I was just blown away. And then when I became a mother, there's like a whole section for children. That's just incredible. And I think it totally brought out the inner child in me. I never had access to picture books. I was reading picture books as an adult, like as a grown up, and seeing the power in how transformative they can be, like just the art, the aesthetics, the themes, it's just such an amazing medium, and that's also why I became an author. So uh yeah,
It's
so
a
not having a library actually ended up being such a positive change in my life later on.
yeah. I mean, it's just it's just such a moving um and informative memory that you shared with us, and thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for asking.
I think
Down memory lane.
librarians and the viewers who are librarians are just going to love that. All of us are going to love this story, but I'm thinking librarians are thinking of the libraries they might be, they might have visited or they work in, and then to trace it back to this beautiful little library that moved you so much.
I should say, I actually remember the face of the librarian, the man who used to give out the books and like make a note. Like he had a notebook in which he would write. We didn't have library cards. And then I would give him the money and he would do that. And that we would beg him if we were late to like, just excuse us this one time. So I remember his face so well. Like he didn't talk much, but he was not necessarily friendly with the kids because it was not like a children's library. Everyone, yeah, it was meant for all people. So yeah, so, and I'm very
I have
thankful
to say,
for
there's a book in there somewhere. There's a book in the story of slightly grumpy librarian.
and yeah.
Is
Oh, I think this is our second book idea. I should make a note of all of this.
is the library still there?
It is. It is. I actually saw the library featured. I Googled it and I saw it featured in an article in a newspaper about how this library has stood the test of time. It's been there, and I found pictures of the library from a long time ago, from probably when I was growing up, and I typically include it in my presentation for kids when I visit schools. So I wish I had it now, but yeah, it's just like it has 3 walls, like a tiny room with
Wow.
3 walls, and I put that picture in, and I say, and I talk about it. Yeah, so
I was hoping so hard you would say that the library is still there, and you did say it.
yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
very happy.
Libraries and librarians are the best. They are they are the cornerstone of every community. I think we are all so lucky, and I'm so grateful to be in a place that has, like you said, libraries that give away books for kids, that open up the world for us, that teach us so many things, that bring joy, that inform us in so many ways, unimaginable ways. So, yay for libraries. And I'm thankful for all the librarians out there.
That's the perfect ending. I have nothing more. Meera, I was just thrilled to be able to talk with you today. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights and your thoughts and your memories involving this beautiful book and your life. And I hope we get a chance to chat again. Do you have anything you'd like to end on besides just that beautiful memory of libraries?
Thank you for reaching out. It was a pleasure being here. You had some great questions. I thoroughly enjoyed going back to the process of how Dumpling Day came about, talking about food. Who doesn't like that? So I love that. And I'm glad we had this platform and opportunity to take that moment to celebrate books and reading and libraries and librarians. So thank you.
Thank you.